Welcome to the Life's Best Medicine podcast, where we are finding hope and healing one episode at a time. No appointment needed, no rubber gloves, and no coping. Just a healthy dose of life lessons to help equip you for this wild journey we call life. Hey everyone, this is a friendly reminder that we are here for entertainment purposes only. We may not even be that entertaining at times, but this is not medical advice. Talk to your doctor, check with your healthcare professionals before making any lifestyle changes or medicine changes. What we're talking about is our clinical experience and what we've seen. And so if you really want our advice, you can consult us. You can actually consult me as a doctor, or you can consult my guest and get all your questions answered. But we can't give free medical advice because we can't pay our bills with that, but we can help to educate you a bit and allow you to think a little bit, and always reach out to your medical professional before making any lifestyle changes. Thank you. Hey everyone, it's September already. The kids are going back to school. We have to get ready for the holidays and all that stuff. Our summer's pretty much behind us. And so I'm very thankful that we have some great episodes that will keep us company and get us back on track and get ready for the holidays and hopefully survive the holidays. We need some tricks of the trade to get us through. And so I want to thank Health Code, Get Health, GETHLTH.com for helping us to have tons of recipes and baked goods, things like that to get us through the holidays so we can stay healthy and not have to start next year trying to get our pants to fit again and all that kind of stuff. So staying active with them, and also with Keto Mojo, keto-mojo.com, for us to track our sugars and ketones and keep us healthy during the holidays. And both have great websites. Even if you're not using their products, I would recommend going to their websites, taking a look at the educational materials, the recipes, and a lot of the blogs. Ben Bickman has been contributing, and so there's a lot of really great information there. But please support them also. They're supporting this podcast and bringing these great stories to you. So I just want to thank my sponsors, and now on with the show. Hello and welcome back to the Life's Best Medicine podcast. Today I have someone from the dark side.
Hey.
Dr. Laura Buchanan. She's working with trochalasion, believe it or not, and I still let her on my darn podcast. You believe that? But I met her and her husband. They were like, it was at I'm trying to think what conference we were at, but I remember you say, hey, we want to look at this low carb and we're still in med school. We want to do all this stuff. I'm like, okay, cool. Here's what you got to do. And then I didn't warn you about trochalasion, so you ended up joining him out there on the East Coast. And so it's pretty amazing what you're doing. And Tro needs to bring his class level up. So I think he did a pretty good job selecting you two to be joining him under his umbrella, right? So yeah, no, we all love Tro. I'm kidding, of course. But yeah. So tell people the journey and what's happened, how you got into this space of metabolic health and what your life's like.
Yeah, well, I feel so lucky to be working with Tro and the rest of the team there, which I'll go into a little bit later. But it's started off, I knew I wanted to go into some field to help out people. And it really started when I saw people in my family, some age really well, and then some unfortunately did not age very well. And we're dealing with chronic medical conditions, complications from diabetes that are just really devastating. And the people who were aging really well, it was the way they were living. And so I knew healthy lifestyle was essential. And I was very passionate about that in my own life and seeing that. And then in medical school, I really learned more about low carb after we took our nutrition curriculum, which is 2 weeks in medical school, and it just left a big gap. It was so underwhelming. And, you learn vitamin deficiencies, but you didn't learn how to practically help people. Like, what can I do? How can I educate the person in front of me to change their lifestyle, to improve their diet, to make a difference?
So in med school, I have to ask you, since I only had like 2 hours of nutrition training in med school, right? They should just eat low fat and veganism, and there you go. So like when you do 2 weeks, what were they telling you in med school?
So I honestly, a lot of it's a blur at this
point.
Yeah,
of course. No, I get it.
I know some of it was pretty standard as far as saturated fat is going to kill you. I mean, maybe they didn't say kill you, but it's going to cause a heart attack. Red meat's going to cause cancer. It was a lot of the standard kind of status quo of old dogma. And and then besides that, a lot of it really was the very about scurvy or other rare vitamin deficiencies or certain newborn errors where like babies can't metabolize certain type of sugars, so things like that, not very common. So again, not very practical for the patient sitting in front of me that I want to help change their life.
Yeah, and you're in North Carolina, right? So you got a lot of we see a lot of metabolic disease, a lot of this damage that we see, and it's so hard to watch. And I think, Tro and I both. I mean, I may express it a different way, but I get very frustrated when you hear people saying, "Oh, you're diabetic. Here, eat more carbs. Here, do this," and you look and they get worse, and it's so frustrating because like, we know what's coming. Like we've seen it. We've seen the show too many times, and it's a nightmare every single time ending. And people don't realize, you know, you may feel fine for a while, but once the damage is done, insidiously underneath it, it's like you have termites throughout the house. You want to kill the termites before they destroy all the wood. Otherwise, you got to tear the house down, and so
Yeah.
seeing that, and the other thing I'm impressed with, I'm really happy for you about, sad for myself about, but happy for you is that you're coming right out and jumping into this, right, with metabolic. Just this morning, my wife was saying, "Gosh, could you imagine if you were in your old job? You'd probably be either dead by now or absolutely miserable, like because you weren't effective." And she goes, "I see you smiling and you can't wait to get to work." And it's such a difference, and for us,
Yeah.
and a lot of people like claimed like would say, "Oh, you and Tro are just doing it for the money." I'm like, I took a pay cut, massive pay cuts, and I know Tro did too, right? Because
Yeah.
you have a cause that you believe in, and you go, "Look, it's better for me to do
Yeah.
this." Not because of financial, but because of enjoying your life more.
Totally. I mean, when you can go to work, and this is, I love working, doing the telemedicine with Tro. When I see a patient and they have gotten off of 9 medications, that was one I saw before maternity leave, and getting someone off of 9 medications, that is when you start following up with them in the future, all it is a celebration. You are just, hey, how's it going? You're feeling amazing? Awesome. Still no medications? Great. And like that makes you really excited to go into work. And it's fun.
Yeah, and I just gave a talk this weekend, and it's so sad to me on stress and sleep, and just being on edge all the time and being agitated and angry. And you know, amazingly, 7 doctors came up to me after, 7 surrounded me, going, "What do I do? How do I get out? I can't take it anymore." And to see the doctors and realizing that, one of the other speakers was talking about suicide rate, which was the highest ever in 2022 in the history of our country, and number 2 on the list besides veterans is doctors. And you realize, man, I was thinking about it yesterday. I thought, if on average 300 to 400 doctors kill themselves, not even talking about the other stress related illness like drinking ourselves to death and all the other bad stuff that comes with it, with diabetes and cancer, and we know chronic stress is not a good thing. And you think about that,
Wow.
ultimately, if each doctor takes care of 2,000 patients on average, that's 800,000 people that lose their doctor every year to suicide alone, not other stuff, or burnout, where they go, "Screw this, I'm doing something else." I have a guy I ran into at the San Diego conference. He said he's been through 3 surgeons trying to get a knee replacement or a hip replacement because he meets with a doctor and then they quit or they move somewhere else. They go, "I'm going to a less stressful area," and you go, "Wow, that is really rough."
Wow, those are shocking statistics. I knew it was bad, but that is so sad to think about. And I mean, I can believe it though. You go to work, you are forced to see basically 40 patients a day, and the patient comes in and you see the complications they have and their blood sugar is still out of control. So what do? You just add more medicine because you only have maybe 10 minutes to do it. And it just, you feel like you're not helping people, and that's not why you did this, and that's hard to live with.
Yeah, it's hard to live with when you realize you're not effective and you go, "Okay, I've become a cog in the wheel." I did that. I'm like, I'm just a cog in the wheel. If I leave, they'll just yank someone else and replace me, which is what happened, right? So you realize, but the reason I stayed as long as I did is because I had a responsibility to my patients. I'm like, I can't just like, but the patients had an option to follow me or not to my new practice. And, the ones who see me here, they're like, "You are a like different person." Like, you know, I was just talking to a doctor yesterday and I have my, we're sitting there talking, and I know I've known him for years. So I have my feet up on the, we're just totally relaxed, chilling, talking to each other like buddies. And we are.
Yeah.
He's like, "Man, it's like when I come here, I feel healing. I feel peace. I feel happy." And we talked to, and as a matter of fact, just to really hammer this point home, because it's so amazing, is that he's in his early 80s, retired doc, and he's dealing with childhood issues, right? He goes, no wonder. And we talked about the ACE questionnaire, and he goes, no wonder I've had all those things, and you realize how much of an impact that has even when we're in our 80s. And if we don't address those things, right, you're gonna have a metabolic struggle forever.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Well, that is what is amazing about the work you're doing, and I think hopefully more and more people are starting to do it. Really address a lot of there's the ACE questionnaire, childhood kind of trauma experiences, and really addressing other root cause issues rather than again just here's a medical condition, I'll treat it with medications.
Yeah, and for
Um,
people who don't know what ACE is, I think it's really important. I would go back and listen. I just recorded an episode a few weeks ago, and set it out some of the stuff I talked about. And I talked to the lead author on this paper, and it's devastating. The most devastating part is after they looked at the numbers with obesity, they did it with the general population, which was 70% Caucasian, 70% college, at least some college experience or college educated. And they found when they looked at all their numbers, the higher your childhood trauma score was, the more linearly related, more cancers, more diabetes, more heart disease, more stroke, you name it. Every disease that we treat gets worse. So they said they brought in a number cruncher, and he went to this big HMO and said, look, I believe the number was $35 million they could save in 1 year by implementing this, because they could address these issues. If they address them, then you decrease your office visits by 35%, and you
wow.
decrease your ER visits by 11 to 12%. And so that nets about 30, I think it was either 3.5 or 35 million in San Diego County alone. And this is a nationwide company, right? And
Yeah.
they went to the doctors, and the doctors, they said, we're not going to do that. We'll quit before we do that, because we're not counselors, we're doctors. Like, we throw pills, we don't throw advice, medical advice, or not medical advice, but psychological counseling. But you go, well, if you get them, if you screen for it and you get them, you go, you need some counseling, let's get you in, because otherwise eating
Yeah.
low carb all day is not going to help you if you're bitter, angry, and you're fighting with your spouse all day. There's a lot of stuff involved with this where we don't want to overcomplicate it, but we can't oversimplify it either.
100%. And that I think going thinking that exact point, going from the ACE, but also thinking about food addiction, where there's if we're not addressing more of what's going on, it makes me think back during residency when I didn't have the tools or the training I do now, and a lot of what I've learned about food addiction has come from Tro. I had a patient who um, he had diabetes that was poorly controlled, and during my first year, he had an amputation of his foot. And unfortunately, there are over 130,000 amputations per year from diabetes alone in this country, which is over 350 per day. I think it might have been per second, like a huge statistic. But anyway, so this patient, I brought him in and I talked to him about low carb keto and said, hey, look, I think we might be able to prevent more amputations from occurring. And he was on board initially and said, okay. And he went keto, his sugars got better, but then fairly quickly, he went right back to his old eating habits. He had to get on higher quantities of insulin. And I tried to call his wife, talk to him more. And by the end of my residency, so 3 years later, he had progressed from losing just one foot to losing both of his legs above the knees. And I failed him terribly, but it was truly a food addiction that made that possible, basically, or for that to happen, because he lost both of his legs so that he could eat whatever he wanted to eat. He could eat the his potatoes that his wife made that he loved so much, um, and that's just so sad. But I didn't have the tools to really know how to treat someone with a food addiction that powerful, and so now that's yeah. I'll stop there, but
No, 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 that's great. No, and I was just thinking this morning, I was thinking, you know what? Like, people would tell me, you know what, if I would have met you 20 years ago, my life would have been different, because now they have all the ravages of the poor glucose control. And I said, if you met me 20 years ago, I would have managed you the same way, because I didn't know any better. I was thinking about this morning, the how profound it is that, I started, because of my personal struggles, I email some guy named Jason Fung that hasn't really helped too many people, except every single person that I meet that comes in my clinic, and me, and like, he answered my email. I was thinking, once if Jason never responded to my email, what would happen? Like, would I have stayed on that road? Because he convinced me, like, look at the numbers. And I started looking at the numbers, and then all these other people like Tro and all these people that we come across and you go, wow, look at Tro. I can't really like people will argue with him and go, okay, this guy, how many people in the world have lost the weight that Tro has lost and maintained it over all these years? I mean, that is because he's looking at the pieces and he wants to help other people out. So, people will say he's a charlatan, he's this, and like they have no idea about Tro. And plus, knowing him on a personal level, like the Tro that we know is different than the persona
Yeah,
that we see on Twitter, right? I mean, really,
he is. He
like people
really
say he's a
is.
bully. Oh, he's not. He's kind and decent, and he's a good person, and he's a New Yorker too. He can't help it. It's in his blood. What's interesting is looking at my stuff on stress and sleep and all this stuff. They found that if you take a New Yorker like Tro, if I took Tro and put him in Wyoming, he would stress out because he's like, "Where's the streetcars? Where's people yelling at each other? Where's all the noise?" Right? And then if I take someone from Wyoming, it's even worse if I stick them in New York because they get a sensory overload and they're like, "Oh my gosh, people are gonna kill me here. This is crazy." So it's amazing. Like you have to find your peace wherever that might be. For me, I'd rather be in the mountains, hanging out with my dog than being in New York City with all kinds of people yelling at me and trying to honking their horns and screaming at each other. It's not my thing. It's not my thing. But New Yorkers, I'm not criticizing you. I'm just saying, I'm just saying I like the peace and quiet. And I'm old too, so just want to enjoy my life.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm with you. I mean, the other thing, Tro's journey is incredible, but everyone that he has brought on to be a part of his team have also had these same incredible journeys. Amy's lost over 200 pounds and maintained it off. Brian, same thing, over 100 pounds. And Alice and Vic, I mean, all of them are living amazing stories. And we're seeing that in our patients too. So it's not just the team, but it is powerful to learn from people who have gone through the same thing. And then so I think I've being able to work with all of them, I've gotten to learn so much. And to again, I think I now have the tools to help someone who is struggling with food addiction and to actually, if maybe I had seen that patient back in the beginning of residency now, maybe there would have been hope to try to help prevent those amputations from happening.
Yeah, and we see that. And I think that's such an important thing is when you see it happening. And the other thing that is great that you're all doing is having someone who's had the struggles and you go, okay, you know what it's like. If I've been skinny my whole life, I don't really have credibility, right? Those of us have struggled. Look, we know what it's like what you're going through, and you can't, you're embarrassed to get on the middle seat on a plane and all those kind of things that that people don't really think about. And so having people who've been through it, it's like if you get diagnosed with cancer, you want to meet someone. Like I always connect my cancer patients together and go, hey, look, this guy had prostate cancer 5 years ago. Here's what his journey was. So and you go, hey, he's still alive. He's got okay, there's hope because the worst thing we do is take away hope and
Yeah.
say, I can't do this. And I'll tell you, that's why Tro gets a little fired up. And I do too when they said it's genetic, there's nothing you can do about it. It's like,
Oh,
well, we have a lot of people who would argue with that.
yeah. Yeah. The genetics argument to me is yes, genetics might play some role for sure, but you can change your lifestyle, you can change the environment that you're in, and that is going to have a bigger impact. Just like diabetes, we know there are some genetic components to type 2 diabetes. However, if you go on a ketogenic diet, you can almost guarantee that you're going to prevent the development of diabetes, even if it runs rampant in your family.
Yeah, I mean, my whole family has diabetes. On my mom's side, it's a devastating, the diabetes. But how much of it is genetic? How much is lifestyle? And like Peter Ballerstedt said at the conference, he said you can't take a basset hound, put it on the treadmill, then becomes a greyhound, right? But you can make the basset hound as healthy as a basset hound can be, right?
Mhm.
Instead of saying you're a basset hound, there's no hope for you. You're never going to be a runner, right? So maybe they could run in the basset hound races and not the not have to run against the greyhounds. Is going to be a challenge. So like the reality is I'm not Sean Baker, so I can't do what Sean Baker's doing. And Tony Hampton, who's one of my other favorites in the metabolic realm, who's a genius and a great guy, he was saying, look, what are we're at a medical conference and he goes, what's the low carb San Diego? And he goes, what's the most important type of study there is? The best study for you, what's the best study to follow? And we go, randomized controlled trial. He said, no, n equals one. What works for you is what matters, right? And say, okay, Tro does it this way. Let me try this. And I just had a great discussion with a patient the other day. She goes, I sleep better if I have a little bit of food before I go to bed. And I go, well, that's not what the data shows. That Ben Bickman just posted something saying the higher your sugar is and the insulin before you go to bed, that's a stress response. You're not going to metabolize as well. And she goes, I have my Fitbit data that every time I eat a little something, I sleep way better and deeper and stronger. I'm like, okay, follow your own advice then, because you have valid valid measurements that say you sleep better like that. I can't argue with that.
Yeah, that's actually really interesting. So Matt and I, when we go on the ketogenic diet, we definitely have very different responses to it. But for him, insomnia can become a real issue. And if he has typically just a bowl of broccoli, so it doesn't kick him out of ketosis, but just some type of carbohydrate like that before bed, he is fine. He sleeps well through the night, but if he doesn't, he'll end up feeling his heart race or pound. And so, yeah, that individual variability is it's fascinating. And you need to listen to the person in front of you because no one knows your body like you.
Yeah, and that's the thing is listening. We're not very good at that. And don't ask my wife because at home it might be a little bit different. But in my office, I go, "What works for you? What hasn't worked? What's worked for you in the past? What hasn't worked? Like what's good?" And so I have people go, "You know what? I did group meetings, it was good." Or if I did this, and and the other thing I love about what you're doing, and I think it's critically important when I'm a little jealous, I'll admit it, but having the community on the app where you can say, "Hey, we're all going to zoom in and talk." I mean, I do it on a lower scale with my patients, and it is amazing what people do for each other. Go, yeah, I was there. Yeah, I struggle with that because the worst thing to do, and the reality is, and it's very clear to me, is the people who don't show up in the community meetings do worse than the people who show up. The people who show up every week, they're on track. Is like no one wants to go to AA when you're struggling with alcohol, but if you walk in the door and go, look, I've had struggles this week, other people say, me too, me too, me too, me too, and then you realize, okay, I'm not the only loser here.
Yeah, 100%. The community app and the community chat is just it's so fun to I just sometimes will scroll through and see people talking about the victories and then also talking about their struggles and then other people will always jump in. Here's what helped me in that scenario. Here's what helped me get past that or just encouragement. You can do it, get back on track. And it you said it. I mean, the people who are engaged in that community are they do better or they stay with it. And we oftentimes in medicine we say, do whatever diet is sustainable. And yes, there's some truth to that thought, but also part of something being sustainable, it is on us as the doctor or the provider to help make something sustainable. And so with the app, that's part of the idea of the app is we can make low carb, keto sustainable. We've created a community of people because you can imagine if you're at home and maybe the people you're with at home aren't low carb or keto, it's going to be a lot harder to maintain that lifestyle. But if you're in an app that has thousands of people that are all doing it with you, at least you've got that community support who is on that same journey.
Yeah, and if you crave Middle Eastern food, Vic can tell you how to do it in a in
Yeah.
a in a better way, right? Or Joe can tell you that my Italians they'll say, "Here's how what I instead of breadcrumbs I use this," and so there's ways to do stuff in a healthier manner. And when the more we're around, most of our questions can be answered by other people who've already experienced it. And for me as a doc, I mean, it's humbling because really, like we were talking about earlier, I think, man, if I knew the stuff I knew now, like 10 years ago, and I look at patients who fail, I go, that's why they failed, right? They need someone to support them. I can't see you once every 3 months as a diabetic and think I'm going to really make an impact on that illness. So having those chronic follow-ups and talk and you had a hard week, let's not go totally off the rails, let's get back on, it's not too late, and so many people, and what I find is a lot of people have this all or none, like they're all in and they're like, how many calories are there in water? How should I eat ice or not? All this stuff. And then they're eating donuts 2 weeks later, right? And you go, okay, let's kind of ease it up a little bit. Let's take our foot off the accelerator and just enjoy the journey a little bit.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Uh, the one of the things unrelated but about the app that I think is super cool and I'm just excited so I want to share that we're working on is we're creating curriculums now in the app. So we've are currently have two curriculums up, one on cardiovascular health. So this is where someone can go in the app, go into a course basically, and you can learn about calcium scans. So trying to more better say what is your risk for future heart disease events, and then it kind of provides some education on that, both with video, PowerPoint presentations, and articles. And we're doing one for diabetes. We've got one for weight loss medications that are extremely common now, and kind of some pros and cons that you need to consider when you're thinking about that. So, and we'll keep on adding more courses as well.
Yeah, that's so huge. I mean, just education, and I've gone through I'll give you a perfect example. One of my
Yeah.
patients, he's been lost to follow up for a year and a half. He's poorly controlled diabetic, was a poorly controlled diabetic. And we sat for an hour and a half with him and his wife on our first Zoom meeting, and we talked about everything. And I wanted routine follow up with him, and we got to get him back on track. And so even with that, he doesn't show up, and like we kept calling him, hey, we need to follow up, we need to follow up, we need to follow up. He wasn't using his CGM and a continuous glucose monitor. Anyways, we finally drag him in, and we're doing a Zoom meeting like this, and we start talking about, hey, look, we gotta. He goes, you know what? I've been avoiding you because I don't want to know the answers. I don't want to know my A1C. I know I haven't been perfect, and I've been, working too much, and I'm stressed, and all the common stuff that we talk about. And I said,
Yeah.
look, let's just cut the low hanging fruit. If you're drinking, too much wine at night, let's get rid of that. Let's get rid of the fruit juice, and let's work together. Like, follow with me a lot. We'll get you squared away. And we get his last and his A1C had actually dropped like 3 points, even though he wasn't perfect, right? Because he wasn't disastrous anymore. But anyways, we were talking, and I said, well, and the other thing I really want to introduce with you is some weight bearing exercise that will help you with insulin sensitivity and all that kind of stuff. And all of a sudden, his wife starts cracking up. Like, we're on a three-way Zoom, right? And they weren't together, and she was somewhere else. And then he starts laughing. And I go, what's so funny about that? And she said, well, he has a degree in exercise physiology. He every day, every single day, he tells me and my son how important exercise is and how it helps with mood and anxiety and stress and, insulin resistance and all that stuff. But I haven't seen him put his shoes on in a year. And he goes, yeah, because that would require me to put my shoes on and go get sweaty and then have to come home and take a shower after a hard day at work. Right. He goes, I know,
Yeah.
obviously I know. So it's not all just about head knowledge. Like, okay,
Yeah.
how do I make it so that I actually go to the gym and I know it's like, even biblically, I think it was Paul who said, like, yeah, I know what to do, but I don't do it. I do the wrong stuff and I know it will make me healthy, but I don't do it. Right. And so a lot of us are in that boat because life stress, responsibilities get in the way a lot of times.
Yeah. Yeah. That is a tricky part too. If you know the person in front of you knows exactly what to do, so how can you get them motivated to start doing what they know is the healthy thing?
Yeah. How do you do that? What's your trick?
I mean, part of it, say, is kind of like what you said, meet them halfway. Say if maybe they're not ready to go to the gym 5 days a week, but maybe they're ready to go for a 5 minute walk and say, hey, why don't you just give me a 5 minute walk and I'll touch base with you next week and ask you how that 5 minute walk went. And then you can slowly go from a 5 minute walk to a 10 minute walk, and maybe you just do it a couple times a week. Sometimes maybe just say, hey, what if you do a little bit of just some squats at your desk at work or some wall push-ups just to break up the day. So very small things, non-intrusive, a couple minutes, and
That,
just try to work it in.
crazy enough, I read a study, a little while back, that basically what they did is people with sedentary jobs, like if they're on call answer all day long, they took some of the people and they had them drink a ton of water all day. Like they just, like their water thing, they kept filling up and they would just keep drinking it. Those guys had better outcomes. They had more weight loss and better sugar control because they drank more water. Is it because water did that? No, it's because they had to get up and pee. So they'd get up and walk across the thing and go to the bathroom. The farther the bathroom was, the better they did. So you go, just little stuff like that, like having a standing desk and moving and sitting at one time for that long is horrible. And being in one place and not moving, and people just don't realize the even if you do exercise.
Yeah. Yeah. Movement. And I think a lot of people, it can be overwhelming to think I have to go to a gym, I have to lift heavy weights, but you don't really need to do that. Just like you said, just movement, walking to and from the bathroom. That is, that's a great starting point.
Yeah, if you're
And
500 pound, that's a huge workout. Like just stand
yeah,
against the wall for a couple minutes, right? Things like that you don't realize. That's taxing on the body. Even Ben Bakikio talks about that he can get people in a failure just from standing.
yeah, yeah. I think I love trying to get or encouraging people to do Dr. Ben's workout, 15 minutes twice a week. Because again, that's something it's not overwhelming to think about a 15-minute workout, and you just slowly increase the intensity of it. Maybe I think initially it can be hard to push yourself to failure. I mean, that's a really uncomfortable place to be, is the failure of your muscles, but just slowly and working your way up.
Yeah. Yeah, so good. So what else do y'all have up your sleeves over there?
So we've got the courses working. I think another kind of useful thing is we've got our Get Help Now chat. So there's the community chat where people post pictures, non-scale victories, food, recipes, a lot of fun stuff. But then in the Get Help Now, maybe you're struggling and you are like, I'm about to have a piece of cake. Please, someone give me, like, what can I do? And there's I think 20 or 50 people who have been really successful in their journey, living a low carb lifestyle, and they will respond really quickly and provide encouragement and some alternatives. Um, but
Yeah,
the other,
that's
yeah,
huge. That's a huge
yeah.
thing too. Yeah, I love that.
And the other thing that's going to be more long term, but I'm really excited about, needs to start moving forward again, is trying to translate the app into Spanish to really provide, hopefully get it out there for a lot more people.
Yeah, that's a huge thing. I mean, I do a lot of work in Latin American countries, so Central America mostly, and it's such a huge need. And it's amazing, just a little, like, it's so frustrating because I can go there and I can give you insulin, I give you drugs and all that, but it's like, I know that's a disaster long term. So whenever we do medical clinics down there, I'll do a class and we'll talk about, get 300 people. So I'm not saying the same thing 300 times like I used to in my old office, and that's uh, a huge thing. And also, I think it's really important. What advice would you give to new grads coming out? Like they're jumping into the system that are going to get, they're going to get eaten up and spit out. Like, what would you say to those people about what you're doing and where you're at?
So I would say don't be afraid to go for it and get out of the system, because it can be really hard once you're in the system to get out, honestly. Um, and learn, like be curious, and because you're going to have to go learn about this stuff for yourself. You're not going to be taught it in medical school or residency, although we are working on medical school and residency curriculums, so hopefully basically a low carb nutrition, uh, and then also ask questions, like reach out to people like us. I was fortunate enough, I reached out to Dr. Westman, I reached out to Tro and said, hey, can I come shadow you? Mark Cucuzella, can I come shadow you for a week? And they were all so kind and said, absolutely, come work with me. And I think don't be afraid to reach out, because I almost didn't do it. I was like, oh, Eric Westman, he's never going to respond to my email. Like, why would he? And he was just as kind as he could be. And I think opportunities won't happen if you don't put in a little bit of footwork and just go for it.
Yeah, reaching out. I mean, that's why I reached out to Jason Fung. I mean, I'm absolutely amazed by how kind. I was just at I was just this morning, I was thinking, I was like, if I'm at a regular medical conference, I'm actually probably one of the smartest people there. But when I go to a low carb medical conference, I'm like, I'm just another guy, right? I'm just another doctor there because all these guys are so smart and so they get it. They get what they're doing to help people. But what the big thing I see is like at regular medical conference, I remember the guy would come and speak, or the male, female, whatever would come speak. Boom, they're gone. They're not
Mm-hmm.
watching other people's. Like when I'm there, you have Michael Eads, who's one of the smartest guys on earth, and you have Dr. Finney, who's brilliant. They
Yeah.
were sitting there at every lecture, listening and watching and saying, "Oh, okay, maybe that's a good idea. Maybe this is a good idea," and asking respectful, good questions about, "Oh, we do it this way, right? How come you're doing it that way? Here's my," and when you can talk reasonably like that, you learn. So
Mm-hmm.
the biggest experts in the world are there, and they're listening to what these other maybe young docs with different ideas, and maybe they're either going to correct that doctor or they're going to say, "Man, maybe you're seeing something we haven't looked at before," And I think that's what's happening. That's why what Tro's doing, as painful as it is for me to say this, no, I'm just kidding. It is. He's really looking at all these different aspects because if you don't treat this food addiction part, you can take page 4 all you want, but you're not going to get better if you're stressed and tense and fighting with your husband all the time and binge eating when you get freaked out about stuff. And I'm looking at this science and it's really amazing. It's like, and Jane Bullen from Nutrition Network was there speaking, and she said, name another animal that will eat when it's stressed. Like if my dogs are stressed, if I take them somewhere, they're not eating. They're not going to eat. They're like freaked out looking around. But we're like, oh, let's stop. No zebra is running from the lion and goes, I'm gonna stop and you have a snack, right? They're running from the
Yeah.
lion. They're not going to waste their energy on digestion. And for us who are stressed all the time, the point she was making is if you're stressed all the time and you're eating all the time, your digestive system is not built that way. It's not supposed to be that way. But why do we do it? Because we get that little dopamine rush and serotonin rush when we eat carbs, and we go, "Oh, okay, I feel better." Even though the lion's still going to kill me, I feel better about the lion killing me. It's crazy, but
That's,
that's what we do.
yeah. No, that I love that analogy. Um, I think It is, that's true. And the going back, I wanted to add to your question about, what can other people who are coming out start doing is if they don't know where to start, go to the Society of Metabolic Health Practitioners, the smhp.org, and there is a way that you can actually become an accredited metabolic health practitioner doing lots of training, nutrition network, and nutrition network lectures, videos that are really good. But then also you can just start with learning. There's some great free resources. There's patient resources, provider resources, and there's going to be more and more content that is added to that. And we're even working on a PowerPoint that, say you're trying to bring metabolic health to your practice, maybe you have a practice with several other doctors or that you work with, and you want to pitch the idea of, hey, let's bring metabolic health here, let's bring keto as an option to our patients. But you might get pushback again about, well, you're going to tell them to eat saturated fat and red meat. You can't do that here. So you can actually provide the evidence in a PowerPoint that's already ready to go basically to that clinic manager or that office to say, yeah, here's all the data that actually supports this is really not only successful, or just that it is really successful and beneficial to the patients.
Yeah, I think there's so much that in medicine we just pass it down, pass it down, pass it down, and no one really thinks and says, "Wait a minute, why are we doing this?" Like, now
Mhm.
when I look at the hospital protocols, like, okay, so you're putting people on a sliding scale insulin, you're giving them a bunch of sugar, you stop their oral medications, and now they load them up on insulin. Insulin is not benign when you're taking that high. So why not stop giving them sugar? Why? Like, what? I always asked that. Even then, before I was a keto, I was like, why are you giving them a bunch of sugar in their veins and then giving them insulin to get rid of the sugar? It doesn't make it just disappear. It's shoving that into their tissues. Now their immune system screwed up. You know what I mean? When you start thinking and you go, why is it we just put people on this sliding scale where they're just getting shot up with insulin all day? It doesn't make sense,
Yeah.
especially if they're there for like it is astounding. And you go, you're here for high sugar levels, and they're giving you sugar in their veins while they're trying to treat your high sugars. It doesn't make any sense at all. But as we get, I mean, once you see it, like as you said, you can't, like all of us say, you can't unsee it. You go, this doesn't make sense, does it? But then when you talk to people, that's just the way it's done. That's it's got to be scientific because we're doing it. It's like, well, it doesn't mean there's any evidence for that. So there's so much in medicine. The more I'm around, there's no evidence for any of this stuff, and we still do it because someone 20 years ago said that's the way you do it, and you don't question it. Tro's a pain because he questions everything.
Yeah.
Right? He goes, "Why are you doing that? Let me look. Is there evidence?" And he looks, "There's no evidence for this. Why are we doing it?" Well, it's because we've always done it that way. Well, that's not a very good answer. Just you've always done it wrong. If you're practicing golf and you're doing it wrong all the time, you get someone who knows what they're doing who says, swing this way. Oh, okay. Now I can hit the ball farther, right? So there's so much of that in in medicine. It's unbelievable.
It is. And it's actually funny. Yesterday, for my insurance company, I get money back if I had a visit with a health coach. And so I had a visit with a health coach yesterday, and they were asking me about my diet. And I told them I eat pretty much meat and vegetables mostly, steak, fish, whatever. And he's like, okay, well, if you're eating steak, just make sure it's the lean cuts of steak and make sure you don't add butter to your food when you're cooking. And so I was like, oh, I didn't tell him I cook in bacon grease.
Yeah.
That's the same stuff that's just continually passed down. And one of the questionnaires actually that you had to fill out for the same health coach meeting, it asked about what how much fat do you have in your diet, and in parentheses, so it's how much fat do you eat, parentheses, um, chips, uh, junk food, milk, whole milk, and then like one other food item. So it asked about fat, and it combined within the fat category chips, junk food, whole milk, and then it might have been ice cream, I think, as the examples. And that's just the flawed logic that is still out there that we're having to fight against. That's coming from, high insurance and um,
Yeah, and sometimes you have to look at it and you go, okay, like when people like I hear it all the time, they go, meat will kill, red meat will kill you. I go, okay, do you know who Sean Baker is? He's a zero coronary calcium. He has all these other things going on. And they go, okay, are you telling me this guy's ill? I look at this guy and you're telling me he's ill with all of his muscle mass. I mean, the biggest indicator of longevity is muscle mass.
yeah,
And up there with that is relationship, having good relationship, right? And you go, okay, once I have a good relationship and a little muscle and I go work out and I said yesterday I just tweeted, I'm like, this is a crazy. Ben Vikiki might be the smartest guy around. He laughs, he jokes, he has fun, he enjoys life, he has relationship with everyone. He's super kind. He works out like crazy, has tons of muscle on. Like Ben might be immortal for all we know because he's just such a and it's not about the money. He doesn't. He goes, if I want to do it, I do it. If I don't want to do it, I don't do it. He likes to go play golf with his buddies. He tells more jokes than anyone I know. It's like, you know what? You look at this Rosetto. There's a place called Rosetto, Pennsylvania. They had the lowest cardiac disease in anywhere in the 50s and 60s. But they were just a tight community. Everyone did social stuff and they hung out and the grandparents watched the kids and the parents could go out to dinner. And, like when you have a supportive environment like that, and that's kind of what maybe the app is more of like a Rosetta where you can go and say, hey, I'm stressed about this. I'm worried about this. And there's studies with people who did choir practice once a week, right? It's not like they're getting a strenuous workout. They had
Yeah.
fewer doctor's visits, less stress, better sleep, less anxiety. Why? Because they go and they talk to people. Yeah, my son's been a jerk this week. Oh yeah, mine too. Huh? And then they have a conversation, and it lowers the stress hormones and the cortisol and the insulin, all the stuff we're trying to deal with metabolic health. So if we forget that aspect of it, then we're struggling. If you eat the perfect keto diet and you're a jerk to everyone and you're nasty everywhere, you might as well be eating cookies
Yeah.
with the physiologic effects. And I'm telling you,
That's,
or if you're lonely all the time, it's a huge deal.
yeah. Yeah. The social isolation as people get older that can sometimes occur is devastating. The statistics about increased risk of dementia, heart disease. I mean, there is a clear, really negative impact from social isolation. Um, and going back to the app, so besides the community chat, there's also, we try to have daily meetings of some kind. So almost all days of the week, that there's a Tuesday night group meeting, a Wednesday meeting, Thursday, sometimes there'll be a fasting lunch group. Wednesday, the topics will change from exercise, stress management, sleep, just rotating through. And then on Friday, there's the podcast that I know you often do, you and Tro do together. And then Saturday mornings, we'll often have topics, um, sometimes journal clubs, reviewing some articles, sometimes how to use a continuous glucose monitor, diabetes, food addiction, exercise. So just try to have something most days of the week so that people can engage with like-minded folks and learn from each other. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's so great what's happening. I think there's so much information out there. So if people say they can't get the information, well, you can, and to have tips on what do I do if I live in a food desert, like where you can't get, what do I do if I'm really busy and don't have time to cook, and just these practical tips that can help people get through, and you're gonna learn all those things. So that's a huge deal too, because the reality is, look, we're gonna go off track and get back on track, and the holidays come or it's your wife's birthday, whatever, but really just saying, hey, there's a supportive community out there that cares about me and wants to know what I'm doing, wants to hear my input. Because so many people, I've realized, I have so many patients that I go, okay, look, like, your training wheels are off, you know how to do this, you're on autopilot, you're doing great. And they go, no, I want to meet with you every month still, because it keeps me on track. Because if I know I'm coming to see you, I don't want to disappoint, and I don't like my numbers going up, and I just want to really stay on track. And once a month is worth it for them to not to go off on their own, and they know left to their own devices they'll be off track and doing crazy stuff, right? So they go, I need the accountability, and that's a big part of what we do also.
Oh, for sure. And I mean, that's why I still wear a CGM pretty much to this day. I've been wearing a CGM most of the time now for at least 4 years at this point. And it's an accountability. I really don't like seeing my CGM go up. It helps me stay low carb keto. And especially when I visit family, I love my family. Not all of them are low carb keto, and there'll be cookies and desserts after dinner. And so I'm like, nope, I don't want to see my CGM go up. So it helps resist that. And I had pre-diabetes, even though I was playing soccer and tennis in college. And so you can have metabolic dysfunction, even if maybe you're not carrying extra weight. And so what you're eating is so important. It goes back to, a lot of people say, you can't outrun a bad diet. And that is so true. I, at the age of, 20, could not outrun a bad diet despite exercising 5 days a week.
Yeah, I mean, I have to call a 27-year-old kid I saw. He's a super high carb guy. His insulin level is 62, right? Even though his A1C is 4.8, is like, that's a disaster waiting to happen. Like, we know
Yeah.
that. And that's why I get frustrated. He's never had an insulin checked by his old doctor. I'm like, holy cow, we got some work to do, young man. And his testosterone is super low because he has so much fat tissue, like visceral fat tissue. He's not a fat guy when you look at him, but he's gained a lot of weight in the last couple of years because the stress of COVID. He was started eating cookies and donuts and cakes and like ridiculous amounts of sugar. Why? Because it makes him feel better. Of course, like you're not a bad person because you want to feel better, but it's going to kill you at a younger age. So we have to have a decision and figure out how to make that better. But knowing the numbers and knowing what we know and knowing the benefits of, like, he'll have a continuous glucose monitor on instantly, right? When we talk today and go, let's just
Yeah.
follow it for 2 weeks and see what it looks like. It's going to be disastrous. And he's going to go, oh, when I eat low carb, then everything looks better. So there's a lot to that too. When you see it, and I still wear a CGM. I have mine on right now too. And it says, okay, because there's a new keto product. Let me try and see what happens. Like all the time, there's certain
Yeah.
chocolates that are say zero carbs, and you're looking like your sugars go crazy. I've enough. I mean, I can't even imagine it. Either it's false advertising. I'm trying to figure out what it could possibly be. But I have people who are eating sugar-free, diabetic sugar-free frozen yogurt. Like if they go to the place and they go, this is sugar-free, and their sugars go crazy. It's like, what? How? If it's sugar-free, what is it? Is it the artificial sweetener that's screwing them up? Is it something that got preservative? I have no idea, but I see it consistently. A certain what place in San Diego, I see. I'm like, either they're putting sugar in it or there's some other issue. But
Yeah.
there's no way to know that without the CGM. Otherwise, you go there twice a week and go, it's sugar free. I can eat as much as I want. We fall into these traps and you start realizing,
Yeah.
yeah, that's not good.
Yeah, the CGM does not lie and it does not fall for false advertisements.
Yeah, and it's not my opinion. I go, it's not my opinion. Like a lady, like I love it. I was laughing because she goes, uh, yes, sourdough bread doesn't have sugar in it, so I could eat that. I'm like, okay, let's see what your CGM tells us, and we'll see who's right or wrong. And then every time she eats sourdough bread, sugar shoot way up. I was like, either the CGM is wrong or the people who told you that there's no sugar in that are wrong. But I think I believe the CGM because it's right every other time you're eating low carb. So, anyways,
Yeah.
things like that where you can actually see it for yourself. The biggest shocks for me and my patients is white rice. Go into white rice and see what your sugars do. I've never seen anyone have Chinese food except for one lady who only ate the lean chicken salad with no dressing on it. But otherwise, I've never seen anyone go to Chinese food and not have their sugars go crazy high, you know?
No, same. They were giving us lunch over at my clinic, and it was Chinese, and I just had the meat and vegetables, but it did have some type of it was cooked in some sauce or oil, and my sugar just went skyrocketed up, and thought I was being healthy. It's fairly healthy. I knew they probably use vegetable oils, but sure enough, it was just very quick, big spike.
Yeah, and that's the thing is, my medical assistant is super thin, fit, young. She's 22 or something like that, like 86 pound, 90 pounds, like super fit, healthy. And she went for orange chicken and had a soda, and her sugars were like 400.
Oh
And you
my
look and you're
gosh.
like, oh my gosh, a huge reason because she's so metabolically healthy, it came down pretty quickly. But if
Yeah,
you're pre-diabetic or diabetic, it stays up for 6 or 8 hours like that, because you have nowhere to put the sugar. It's a problem. You got to pee it out at some point. So yeah,
yeah.
it's incredible when you see those things. That's the value of the continuous glucose monitor and see the effects of exercise. As a matter of fact, one of my guys just yesterday, he's a soccer player. I go, let's get you exercising it. He's crushing it with low carb. I mean, it's ridiculous. All he had to do is get out of his own way, right? And he goes, I love what I'm eating. I'm having fun. I'm having carne asada, and I just got rid of the tortillas and the rice and all that. So, anyways, and he's a Chinese food guy. Whenever he has Chinese food, his sugars go astronomically high. He goes, okay, I'm done. No more Chinese food. Like this third time he realized, okay, every single time I can't do it. So,
Yeah.
anyways, he was exercising, and when he would exercise, his sugars would stay really flat and level. He said, "This week, look, his sugars went way up with exercise. Like, oh, you're fat adapted now, right? You can get your insulin's low enough now where you're releasing." He's like, "Oh my gosh," because he was worried his sugars went up. I go, "That's good. That's a good sign." He's all happy now. He was stressed out when he came in. He's like, "Why is my sugar doing that?" I was like, "Were you drinking Gatorade?" No, I was fasting. I'm like, okay, that means your body's doing what it's supposed to do now. That's good, right? So
Yeah.
it's not all spikes are bad, and if you're stressed and not sleeping intense, watch what your sugars do, right? And
Yeah.
as a matter of fact, during the COVID, it doesn't have to be bad stress. I was actually surprised when Jane was talking from Nutrition Network, what she was talking about. I was like, thank you. You're talking about something that's really critical that no one talks about. And I was getting so excited during the time my sugar went from 70 to 136. Right. And I was like, and I went up to ask a
Yeah.
question. I'm always afraid Doug's going to yell at me when I ask a question too. So my sugars went up. Then afterwards, it came straight down. And then when I gave my talk, the same thing, boom, 158 went up to from
Yeah.
72 or something to 158. So tell me stress doesn't affect you. I can show you my CGM reading every time I give a talk and see what happens. And it's not just being fearful. I wasn't fearful. I was like excited. I wanted to get the information out, and you're engaging with people and answering questions. And if Rob Sivas asks me a question, my sugar goes like three
Uh,
times as high because he stresses me out. But other than that,
Yeah.
I mean, but being around good people, enjoying your life and all these things, and building a community, I think that's what we're talking about. And having young docs like you jumping on board, because you'll know stuff that you'll figure out stuff that Tro and I never even considered yet, right? And you go, hey, we're doing this with patient, this is working. Okay, let's look at that. Let's try that. And so that's what's great. Everyone will take. I think about it as like almost like I don't have an original thought. All I do is synthesize what Ben Bickman said, what Jason Fung has said, what Tro has said, and we go, okay, Tro says this. Let me look at that. Yeah, he's right. Like some of these people have to go on a higher fat diet first to lower their insulin level and get insulin sensitive. Maybe you don't work out the first day. Maybe you start doing things slow. And like what you're saying, graded exercise, just do something at least. And then when your mood gets better and your stress level gets better, then you're more likely. And then simplifying life a little bit. Like if you're hectic and you're stressed out and you're making bad decisions, suddenly just saying, okay, I'm not going to work 4 jobs, let me work 2 and like make the best of it. Let me cut my spending a little bit, and you'll be happier and do better. I speak from experience, on these kind of things. When you're
Yeah.
you really have to. I had to, and Tro had to. Like people don't realize, like I know behind the scenes, Tro was nuts. He was trying to build his business. He was working overtime shifts at the hospital, working all night long, and then having, wife and kids at home. And that's stress. That's hard to do.
Yeah.
And he was doing better than me because I'll never forget it, man. I mean, one thing that really hit me is it changed my life. Really, we were in Boca Raton speaking. First, Rob Sivas talked about cutting your stress level down. I had already talked to Ben Bickman about these 5 things I have to do, and I'm thinking I'm stressed all the time and I'm not sleeping. That's probably not a good combination.
No.
And we're at the meeting and I'm stressed out because I'm off work Thursday, Friday, and Monday. So I'm like, oh my gosh, it's gonna take me a month to catch up. I'm stressed out while I'm there even. And they're talking about not being stressed. I'm like, I'm stressed thinking about how stressed I'm gonna be when I get back. So I didn't want to take vacations ever because I knew I had to come back. So we're at the conference and Troy's like, hey, I'm Brian, I'm heading out early. I go, oh, really? Why? He goes, well, since we're in Florida, my wife and I are going on a cruise. I'm like, you're going on a cruise? You've been out of your office and you're going on a cruise too? Like, he goes, yeah, I do direct primary care. People just call me. I have my phone with me. I was like, holy cow. When I got back, I had like, seriously, I think I had 140 messages I had to call back and lab reviews. And my schedule was jammed. I was working 20-hour days. And I'm like, that's when I said that I'm done. I'm not living my life like this anymore. I'm done. I don't
That's
care how much
unreal.
money I made. It's just, you can't spend it because you're working all the time. Then you're stressed all the time because even on vacation, you're stressed because you're like, I got to finish my charts from last week and get my charts ready for next week. Right. And I'm looking at
Yeah.
labs and all this stuff is going on. You can't just, like, it doesn't stop when you leave. You're an ER doc, you can do that. Right.
Yeah.
But yeah, what we do is primary care. There's something special in that. And also the longevity of follow up and care and knowing the kids. And, there's a benefit to all of us when we know our patients.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Yeah. That is, I feel bad for everyone who has to work and live in that system. And I'm so glad you got out of that system. I mean, there's a study that was published, it was over a year ago now, but that said if primary care doctors did all of the required tasks of them, it would take 27 hours a day.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. 27 hours a day. That's all you have to do. It's all you have to do is work
Yeah.
27 hours a day and not sleep and not spend time with your family. And we're telling people, like, one of the best questions I ever had is, a buddy of mine said, hey Brian, we haven't gotten together for dinner in a year. I go, well, it's because you're there. And I go, look, it's not you. Because he goes, are you still mad at me? And I'm like, mad at you? I've never been mad at you. Why? And he goes, because I haven't seen you in a year. We've talked like 4 times. I was like, gosh, man, let me tell you about my life. So I started telling him, and he stopped me and he said, Brian, if you were your own patient, what would you tell yourself? And I said, yeah, I get it, man. I get it. I got to slow down. I was on the accelerator full speed all the time. And how are you going to enjoy stuff? Like, you're on accelerator and you're thinking, okay, I just want to get home and see my family. And then someone wants to show you pictures of their grandkids. You're like, oh my gosh, I don't have time for this. Okay, they're cute. Okay, let's move on to the next
That's
thing. But now it's like, oh my gosh, look at that one. What's his name? What's her name? What are we doing? Like, that kind of stuff. Where it's a totally different environment than when you're under this time pressure. All that's what stressed me out. Not the hours necessarily. I didn't like the hours either, but it was that, okay, I'm like helping you get off insulin, and I hear this knock, 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 knock. Doctor, 5 people are waiting. You got to hurry. Can you step up your pace? I'm like, you know what? I need to help this person right now, right? But then I
yeah.
can't have everyone else wait. And so it's just, and I always want to be mindful of people's time. I still do. So, anyways, all those things you look at and you go, that's why doctors are killing themselves. They can't deal with this anymore because they're not doing what they're designed to do. They're healers. They went in to help people, and most doctors are good people and they want to do the right thing, but you get eaten up by the system. And they go, look, X number of people have to have this procedure done. If you don't do it, you're not getting your bonus. Like, oh, okay. Then what they do is they fire those nice patients because they're not going to meet their bonus if they don't get this procedure done that they don't want to do. So it's hard. It's a hard thing. And really, it's like us being human beings and saying, okay, no one's bonusing me anymore. Painfully, no one bonuses me anymore, right? Because I'm not, but I'm the most effective I've ever been as a doctor. And I'm not on the bonus and I'm not on the top doctors list and all that stuff. But you know what? I don't care if I can help the patient in front of me. You can keep all your reward. What are you gonna do? Stick them on the wall? I have all these awards. I just threw them away. I'm like, what am I doing with this? It's like, okay, in 2003, I won best doctor, whatever. What good is that if I'm not effective in my patient? So I think a lot of us have come to that perspective, and saying, I don't need people to pat me on the back. I need to take care of my patients and go home and see my family and take care of them too. So that's why I'm so happy for you being a doctor mom also, right? That's a challenge.
Yeah, yeah, that's been the biggest blessing. A new part of my heart opened up when James was born. So he's 8 weeks tomorrow, and it's amazing.
Oh, and since we're at the end, I got to ask you, so what's life's best medicine for you? Like
It
looking back and where do you find your peace? You're like when things are going rough, where do you turn? Where do you find life's best medicine, doc?
totally the people around me. It's my family, my friends. If stuff gets hard, I pick up the phone, I call one of my brothers, and or it's something super exciting, I pick up the phone and call one of my brothers. It's my parents. It's totally the people around me. And I think you just surround yourself with love. That is life's best medicine.
Yeah, and I agree. And if we could give that love to our patients and we want to help people and we're positive, that's the thing is really realizing the impact we have on each other. Like look in the mirror. If you're frowning and grumpy all the time, people are gonna be frowning and grumpy back to you. If you're smiling and happy, most people are gonna be nice. And if not, like when I smile to someone on the street and they walk by and they don't acknowledge me or they don't, I go, they must be having a hard life or a hard day. It's like they don't want to engage as a human being. Maybe they're shy, maybe they're quiet. So I don't get offended by it. I just go, wow, that's kind of. But when you see someone smiling, people are like, okay, are they on something? What's going on with this guy? Why are they happy? Like. But in certain
Yeah,
parts of the country, when I go and everyone's smiling, and when I go to Arizona, everyone I walk by, it says good morning, hello, how are you? In Guatemala City, in Guatemala, everyone's nice. Like good buenos dias every day. Like
yeah,
everyone's happy and you see them smiling. They have nothing compared to us and they're happy. It's like, okay, these guys get it more than we do. Like they get it. They're nice to people and strangers. And if you need something, they'll help you, even though they have nothing, and all those kind of things. Anyways, I think these
yeah.
are all like big lessons that we can all learn from. And I'm so happy for you connecting with Tro and really like you're getting it. It's like success is what you're talking about is having relationships, having family, having people that love you. The people in Roseto, Pennsylvania were not the richest, smartest, best looking, whatever, but they had relationship with each other, and that's what matters. So, hey, anyone listening, this is all gold advice. This is something to reassess and look and say, am I being a jerk to everyone? Am I being nice? Am I smiling at people on the street? Am I meeting strangers or helping them if someone has a flat tire or something like that? It's scary these days because you never know, but
Yeah.
if you have a group of people, maybe you stop and help, but or call assistance, whatever. I think it's just looking out for other people and helping. And that's what Tro is doing. And what you're doing is saying, let's build a community. Those people who are on the fringe of, being 400 pounds and they're embarrassed to go to the gym, but they can join you on a Zoom meeting and they feel comfortable doing that. And, you could turn your picture off if you don't want to be seen, but just listen and absorb and know that there's people out there who care about you and love you and love you where you're at. You don't have to be six pack abs. As a matter of fact, those of us carrying around a little extra weight have a survival benefit if there's ever a famine. So just tell people that. Like, I'm hedging my bets just a little, just in case things get rough.
I love it.
So, anyways, keep up the great work and thank you so much for joining me. And everyone, go back and listen to this one a couple times. This young doc has a lot of wisdom. Even though she should be on the West Coast, she's on the East Coast, but that's okay. We'll forgive her for that. But so, Dr. Laura, if people want to know how to track you down and consult you, how do they do that?
Yeah, so you can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Laura Buchanan MD, and you can find me on Aging Successfully Substack.substack.com, and then go to drtro.com if you're interested in becoming a patient.
Awesome stuff. And you're licensed in only 27 states or something?
Pretty close, yep.
When are you going to step it up? Tro's in 50, right?
He is. Hey, if I'm not licensed in your state, I will get licensed in your state as soon as you reach out.
Hey, be kind to yourself, be kind to others, and have a great week.
Yeah, thanks so much, Brian. You too.
Thank you for joining me.
My pleasure.